Here at the Silverstone Museum, we are going to be celebrating 75 years of the Formula One Drivers' World Championship. And to start that off, in the run-up to the key date in May, when that first race happened out on track here at Silverstone, we're going to look at karting. The reason karting is so important, it's where all the drivers start to learn their skills of overtaking, their skills of car setup, working with their engineer, normally, often, their dad or family members. And what we're doing is we're going to start to charter that karting journey. And then when we step away from karting, we're going to start to look at the junior formulae. All of those cars, iconic things such as Formula Fords. We're even going to look at Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 3000, all of those vehicles that a driver would use on their way up to Formula One. So come with me on a little journey through history, looking at some of these iconic machines. The traditional place for a Formula One driver to start racing is in cadet karting, and we've got a couple of brilliant examples here of cadet karts. This one is a particular favourite of mine. Back in 1990, Anthony Davidson, the Formula One driver and FIA Sports Car World Champion, raced this kart. He raced it here at Silverstone, and it's really well restored example of the kart. We've got these very simple spring-loaded pedals just here. We've got a tiny steering wheel and a lovely little speedo just on the top there, lovely little lap timer just on the top here. We've also got, some of you may know, Ant's quite a little guy, and he was very small when he was racing at karts at about 8 years old in here. We've got the extra seat bolster that sits in here. Fuel tank sits just between your legs. And then we've got this small capacity 60cc cadet engine. A couple of other things you notice about the karts, we've got the bumpers around the front and the sides and the rear to give the driver a little bit more protection. We've also got under here the rear axle and the brakes that sit just over here. I love the fact that this car has been restored with the original kart sticker from the Kart Grand Prix that we can find out from this sticker was on the 4th and 5th of August 1990, and the track they used then was a little loop just around where we have the Luffield complex today. This one is absolutely brilliant. Next up, we're going to look at Lewis Hamilton's cadet kart. So, from Ant Davidson to Lewis Hamilton. This cadet kart was one used by Sir Lewis Hamilton, long before he became a Knight of the Realm. This one was where he started his career. In 1996, this one was used. Again, just like the cadet kart we've looked at, nice small seat. I think Lewis must have been a bit taller than Ant because there's no bolster here to help him get to the pedals. And a very, very similar looking cadet 60cc engine. However, this kart has got some modifications for both safety and speed. They're a little bit different from the one that we've just had a look at. First up, you notice these nice big side pods, front bumpers. Well, these bumpers were there for safety to protect the young drivers when they're racing these karts. You'll notice the fuel tank has got a silver cover on it. That's for heat management of the fuel. Also, eagle-eyed amongst you will notice we've got an anti-roll bar in here. That can be taken out and changed to really adjust the rear of the car, the kind of how much grip it would get and how the chassis would move to really enhance the driver's ability to engineer these karts to make them go quicker. This really is where drivers start to learn the skill not only of overtaking and racing, but actually the way in which they can develop the car. We'd change that anti-roll, we might change the rear axle, we might change tyre pressures, all of those things to make these karts go even quicker. When a driver traditionally moved on from cadet karting, they'd moved up to something like this. This is a much bigger kart, a bigger engine. In this case, it's got a 100cc engine, a much wider kart, more things that can be developed and tweaked. We've got the anti-roll bar, we've got a much more sophisticated braking system in this kart, but some of the things are still the same. You've still got the safety bumpers and barriers around the outside of the kart. You've still got that centrally mounted fuel tank, and the engine could be really tweaked and used by the driver, so we could lean off the fuel air mix as we're racing these. You often saw the drivers when they were racing these 100cc karts leaning over and tweaking them. Pretty quick, these things, and because they're so low to the ground, you really did give the drivers that sensation of absolute speed and pace, and the racing in these type of karts was incredibly close. Nowadays some of them move up to 125cc engines, and a traditional stepping stone from this might be to cars or potentially to a larger gearbox kart. This one is a historic kart from 1992. It's a 125 kart, and they actually raced on the full Grand Prix circuit here at Silverstone. These type of things would top 140 miles an hour, and they would lap the Grand Prix circuit not far off a Formula 3 car's time. They are proper rapid, and part of the reason for that is they're very wide, good grip from the tyres, but an incredibly low centre of gravity. Often you'd find drivers would move from this potentially straight to a car or possibly onto gearbox karts on their journey to professional racing. Let's go and have a quick look at a Formula Ford car. The traditional first step for drivers moving from karts to cars was often something like this. This is a Formula Ford car. The traditional setup for a car like this is a single seat, rear engine, often a 1600 engine, and incredibly popular. By the mid-1960s, moving into the 1970s, virtually every Formula One driver cut their teeth in Formula Ford. Names such as Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell had tumultuous battles in Formula Ford in these type of cars. We had races such as the Formula Ford Festival at Brands Hatch, which were a really great cacophony of all of the drivers coming to one place, experience a knockout race meeting at Brands Hatch. That was a great event to go to, and in fact still is. These Formula Ford cars offer drivers the opportunity not only to build on their racecraft, but also very much start to develop their engineering skills. You can change your suspension settings, your steering, your tyre pressures. All of it's adjustable. You can start to talk to engineers and mechanics about how you make those changes. You get used to a proper cockpit. When we started with these cars, manual gearboxes, very, very common. And you start to have features such as rev counters, oil and water temperatures to kind of adhere to and adjust to and give information on those kind of settings. And as we move further back, you've got a proper big engine behind you. So you're starting to build that sensation of having the noise and the exposure to the engine. Again, at the rear of the car, we can change anti-roll, we can change suspension settings and lots of things. These vehicles really are the step towards a proper racing car. We learn lots in karts, but this is the vehicle that really starts us on that journey towards professional car racing. The next step up from Formula Ford for our drivers is Formula 3. Now here at the museum we've got a great array of Formula 3 cars. I'm going to take you around and show you them, and this is one of the early examples. Late 1960s, our Formula 3 cars looked like this. This one is a Titan chassis. It's been really well restored and it's a lovely, lovely looking car. It gives you that look of the early Grand Prix cars had, with that almost cigar shape. You've got adjustable suspension at the front. Again, you can play with your tyre pressures. You sit in a cockpit very much like a Formula One cockpit at a time. And the really scary bit is when we get the camera in here, you'll be able to see the exposed chassis that you can see that you're sat in. You've got an engine at the back. Now, these cars were known as the Screamers. They have a 1 litre engine in that makes a phenomenal noise. And to hear these cars, they sound absolutely brilliant. Drivers such as Jackie Stewart, Warwick Banks and others drove these kind of cars at pace, and they sounded great and they look great. There's a big historic following for these cars as well. And they're one of the ones that personally I love to go out and watch at some of our historic meetings here at Silverstone. What's great about them is also mechanically, they're relatively easy to work on. You can see all the exposed features, you can see the engine, you can see the gearbox, you can make tweaks and changes, and you can generally get in and enjoy them. Maybe not as quick as some of our professional drivers, but you can certainly enjoy them. These type of cars really were the stepping stone before we started to move up into international racing, such as Formula 2, Formula 3000, and then the dizzy heights of Formula 1. But we're going to stay with Formula 3 for a minute, and we're going to look at a couple of other examples that we've got here at the museum. By the mid to late 1970s, our Formula 3 cars started to look like this, and you can notice they've really started to develop. And for the driver, that meant a couple of key factors. Firstly, aerodynamics. We're dealing with wings at the front and at the rear of the car. That's creating downforce as the car cuts through the air. These wings are pushing these tyres into the track, giving the driver more grip, making the cars faster, and giving the drivers something else to learn, handle, and develop their skills working with. The other thing through this period is we started to develop our slick racing tyres. These tyres with a slick tread pattern need a lot of work to warm them up, to get them to the right operating temperature. They give the driver a huge amount of grip in comparison to treaded tyres. And these two features in Formula 3 really do enable drivers to start to really elevate their skills. In Formula 3, it's really where we start to see the creme de la creme, the best of the drivers, really elevate their status. Formula 3 is still an incredibly significant championship today, and all of the drivers in Formula 1 go through some form of Formula 3 racing. I love the detailing on this car, things like these huge expanded wing mirrors. Again, wing mirrors in racing cars are always a little bit tricky to use. Again, when you look inside the car, quite a sparse cockpit, manual gearbox again. And the other feature with these Formula 3s, and we'll look at another more modern one in a moment, these air intakes that sit out the side of the engine, feeding air into these engines to get them through the air pretty quickly. These cars started to be used on the international scene as well. We started to work our way through Europe with Formula 3 and into other countries and continents. Let's go and have a look at a Formula 3 car, an incredibly successful Formula 3 car from the 1980s. The final Formula 3 car that we're going to have a little bit of a look at is actually, personally, one of my favourite exhibits here at the museum. This Reynard. It was raced by Johnny Herbert, who went on to become a Formula 1 race winner here at Silverstone, the British Grand Prix in 1995, one of those races. Well, this car was used in 1987. It was the car that took him to the British Formula 3 title. And the British Formula 3 Championship was one of the championships to win, a real badge of honour on your way through to becoming a Formula 1 driver. Names such as Ayrton Senna, Mika Hakkinen and others going through that British Formula 3 Championship, and Johnny Herbert incredibly successful. This car won here at Silverstone in Formula 3 races, both as Grand Prix support races and as standalone. So what's different about this than the one we've just looked at? Well, first of all, we've still got these wings and slicks that I talked about, but now we're moving into the realms of movable aerodynamics. So the front and rear wings can be adjusted. Therefore, when the drivers go to maybe a tight and twisty circuit, they can give themselves a little bit more downforce, a little bit less drag, depending on the type of circuit, the length of circuit they're racing at. The other key significance with this car is safety. Looking at the other Formula 3 cars, when you look in, you can see the exposed chassis. Well, this car, carbon fibre. We've got a very protective driver safety cell. Yes, it's true the driver's head and neck are a bit more exposed than we see in single-seater racing today, but it's a big step up from the kind of things that we've seen in some of those older cars. Lovely big rollover hoop. That air intake that I mentioned is ever present on these Formula 3 cars, sitting out there nice and exposed. Again, manual gearbox. You see the side-mounted radiators in here. It's a lovely car. Reason this is one of my favourites, let you into a secret. my first ever race meeting here at Silverstone as a very small child, this car won. It won the first race that I ever came to at Silverstone and has really taken that passion for me that I've had all of my life. The step up from Formula 3 was to Formula 2. Makes sense, doesn't it? Formula 1's the pinnacle. Well, on your way there, this, if you were racing in the 1960s, is the type of car that you might have raced. 1964 Brabham BT10 Formula 2 car. It was raced by Denny Hulme, who then again went on to race in Formula 1. Back in the 1960s, a lot of teams such as Lotus, Brabham, McLaren, they produced cars for Formula 2 and sometimes Formula 3 racing as well. And drivers would often race within the championship. So they would race in Formula 2, Formula 1 and sports car racing and lots of other things if they were a particular works driver. These Formula 2 cars, though, they were the bedrock of getting you that step into Formula 1. And this one is absolutely lovely. I love the restoration work. It just looks brilliant. But some of the couple of scary features I can see. If I look at the suspension here, you've got the exposed brake lines sitting right out there. You've got the anti-roll bar, so you can make all those adjustments. You could really develop this car. Very exposed cockpit and exposed fuel tank that the driver is almost sitting inside. Again, that was quite common in Formula 1 cars at the time as well. You're sitting inside that aluminium fuel tank. You've got these gorgeously shaped and crafted wing mirrors. Again, though, wing mirrors, not the most helpful things on a racing car generally. You've got your manual gearbox, very exposed cockpit, but we have started to get a bit of rear head protection. We've got this lovely arrangement around the back here where we've got the suspension and everything crafted together. It just looks an absolute work of art the way this has been put together. Gearbox sits right out the back of this car, actually way beyond the rear axle and beyond the line of the back of the wheels of the car. It's a lovely, lovely example of a Formula 2 car, but we're going to jump over into the 1990s and look at the equivalent of Formula 2 then, Formula 3000. For a number of years, the junior formulae, the step up to Formula 1, wasn't called Formula 2. It's been called Formula 3000, it's been called GP2, and now it's back to being called Formula 2 again. Anyway, telling you that story, I want to show you this brilliant car. Again, another one of my favourites. I remember seeing these racing regularly when I was a child. This is a Formula 3000 car. This one's a Reynard from 1992. An incredibly successful and very, very quick racing car. It really did prepare drivers for what was about to come in Formula 1. Yes, some of the technology wasn't quite there, but when we look at the detailing, we've got the front wing with the anhedral front wing, so we're using air under the car as well as over the top. We've got the wishbone suspension with push and pull rod suspension units in the same way that you'd have in Formula 1. All of that being adjustable so the driver can really work with the engineers to develop those components. You've got huge brakes which need cooling ducts here. Again, another feature of Formula 1, that brake and tyre management is really, really important. Particularly important that you learn it in Formula 3000 before you make your step up to Formula 1. Again, fully carbon fibre tub, just like in Formula 1. Inside the cockpit, a driver would feel so much more secure in here. You've got a properly built-in rollover hoop. We've got our steering wheel with our digital dashboards. We've got a manual gearbox. Very quickly, these cars moved to semi-automatic like we have in Formula 1. You've got your air intake above the driver's head, and then you've got all this bodywork through to a fully adjustable rear wing. We've also got a big diffuser at the back of the car that is sucking the rear of the car down towards the track. We're even using the exhaust underneath that diffuser to try and amplify those aerodynamic effects. These cars were so quick that back in the era of the 1990s, early 1990s, when you had Formula 1 teams who maybe weren't as established as some of the front runners, teams like McLaren, Ferrari and Williams, they were the front runners, and you had some slightly obscure, smaller teams at the back. Well, these Formula 3000 cars were quicker than many of those Formula 1 cars. There are stats that show that at some races, these things would have qualified halfway up the grid in a Formula One race. The drivers that raced in this series really were building their skills to get themselves that final step up to Formula One. And the champions and the drivers that raced in this series, people such as David Coulthard, Rubens Barrichello, Alan McNish, amongst a myriad of others who really cut their teeth and showed what they could do on their journey to being a Formula One racing driver. I hope you've enjoyed this slow trawl through junior formulae here at the Silverstone Museum. We're building up to celebrating the 75th anniversary of the FIA Formula One Drivers' World Championship, and we're going to be having a special exhibition here that's going to launch in May of 2025. But all of these junior formula vehicles, they're all going to be here between now and leading up to that period. And when we start to look at those junior drivers and the way they made it, they've been able to launch their careers in Formula One. And they've driven amazing vehicles, such as this, and 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 finally this. Get your motorsport fix in 2025 here at the Silverstone Museum.